So hi, everybody. Um, I'm Jeremy Lentz, and I'm glad to welcome you to this month's Deep Transformation Live Network meeting. And as we progress further into 2024, I'm sure we can all feel, like me, like the tectonic stresses of the extreme inequality and political polarization and ecological breakdown that just seems to continue leading us ever closer to that precipice. And for anyone who cares about our world and where it's headed, it's just so easy, isn't it, to get overwhelmed by despair and just kind of feel powerlessness in the sense there's no good path forward. But here at the DTN, really the whole point of our network is to help us explore other alternatives. And really to look squarely and honestly at the dire state of the world, not to turn away from that, but to share with others the possibilities of redirecting our civilization into a better trajectory. In fact, as our tagline states, on the as you sort of click on our site, it's exploring pathways toward an ecological civilization. So we are really incredibly fortunate here in the DTN to count as members three deep thinkers who, in their unique ways, have been exploring those pathways toward a life-affirming future in the books they've recently written. And they're going to be here today. One is Cari Taylor, who's the author of One Living System, an exploration of life's sacred language and our collective journey. We're also going to be joined today by Richard Flyer. He's the author of Birthing the Symbiotic Age, an ancient blueprint for a new creation. And finally, we're going to be joined by Paddy Le Flufy, author of Building Tomorrow, Averting Environmental Crisis with a New Economic System. And with each of those books illuminates a different aspect of our future potential. And they also share something very deep, a deep, systems-based, life-based, life-affirming foundation. And today we'll be kind of exploring their shared understanding together and also their unique perspectives on what's possible. But before we actually get started on that, these monthly DTN meetings, as you know, they're a chance for us to get more connected together as a group, to basically build ourselves as a global community, meet each other, build our social cohesion, get inspired by what others are doing all around, and build our collective intelligence to shift our trajectory. So what we're going to do right now to help this cohesion is we're going to go right now into breakout groups for just the first 5 minutes, just to meet each other and build a heart connection. Breakout groups of about 4 people per group. Then we're going to go into the main panel discussion. And then after that, we're going to rejoin the same breakout groups for another 10 minutes for a deepening conversation. And after that, we'll rejoin the main group and then have a Q&A with the panelists. So let's go into those breakout groups right now. And remember, we've got just 5 minutes right now, just a time to share your name, where you're joining from, maybe a sentence or so about whatever you're bringing into the space right now or something you're interested in about today's session, or just say if it's your first time here or whatever. And really remember to hold space for each other. Make sure everybody in the group gets a chance to be heard. And we're going to try to make sure you're in the same group later on. Sometimes things get a little squirrely and might not happen in every case, but hopefully you'll get to meet each other now and then share more with each other later. So let's break out and then back again in 5 minutes. Okay, well, that is such a joy to just connect with people, and then we can then sort of go a little bit deeper later on. But now is our chance to really begin to start to go deep with our 3 panelists, with Cari and Richard and Paddy. And so if we can get all you 3 spotlighted right now, then we can start to engage in talking about your books. So as we're waiting for, oh, great, spotlights are taking place. I see Cari joining us. Hi there, Cari. And in fact, I wanted to begin just kind of focusing on your book, Cari, but hi there, Paddy, and then Rich is going to join in a moment. So, Cari, I we've known each other for actually quite a. Oh, by the way, I just wanted to say I really invite for Richard and Paddy to be in the spotlights too while we're all talking, so we can not yeah, so all four of us can sort of be together in the space. Thanks. But so Cari and I have actually known each other for kind of a couple of years now because Cari has been one of the essentially like founding members of the moderators group for a while. So I've come to know you, Cari, fairly well from that group. But as I started to research your background more, I just felt there was so much more about you that I hadn't even, just hadn't gotten such a good sense of, just about how you were born and raised in Western Australia, how you held tea parties with the animals in the countryside, and how you got this unique sense of the landscape navigating hot air balloons, and how you went on to marry an Aboriginal man and have raised a family of 3 as proud Warramunga children, and how you studied metaphysics and regenerative agriculture, Eastern philosophy, and that you are an initiated Kriyaban yogi. So what I'd love to sort of start out with, Cari, is just ask you to kind of just give us a little bit of a sense of how all this rich path of your life ended up kind of manifesting in this incredible book you've written, that you have shared with us all about like this one living system.
Thank you, Jeremy. And I am really grateful to be here with everybody tonight. It is true, when I actually sat down to write the book and I was bringing in pieces that are really important for people to know about how we arrive at this space, to be able to write something. And it was such a meandering path of really deeply knowing and living on and loving the land, as well as really embracing the skies and the heavens, through hot air ballooning and these sorts of things. Such strange sort of things that would all sort of thread together. And I think many writers would often say that the stories are within them, the writing is within them, and it comes from us. It almost gets to the point where it's beating on us to say, let me out. And I argue in the book actually that everybody has that same story in them, waiting to be told in some form.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me it was really about weaving all of these pieces together and understanding what they meant.
Mm-hmm.
Really understanding how that pathway of not only knowing the land and the sky, but first of all, studying the physical body and being a coach and a trainer of physical athletes for so long, and then becoming a counsellor and working through the mental health industry for a very long time, and in amongst that, studying my metaphysics, and that being the real deep foundation that everything then sat on. So it really was a weaving of tapestry of all these different, pieces of myself sort of coming together from the experiences I've had of life.
Yeah. And it seems like what I picked up, one of the major things I picked up from the book is like that everything that you described, all the things that we're doing, both in our own personal lives and how we're relating to the world, is part of this one living system. And you describe it basically like as a language. And what I'd love you to do maybe is just to summarize for people, like, what do you mean when you're talking about one living system? How can we make sense of that phrase?
Sure. It is actually, one of those things where, again, we're using language that we have right now that it's easy for us to be able to understand. And one of the things I do notice on DTN is we have these conversations around language all the time. What is it, and how do we choose right words and this sort of thing? Because the interesting thing about the living system is that it's not really a system the way we define a system. Mm-hmm. And it's not, I actually discuss in the book that it's not something that we would call a blueprint by standard, because it's not something that life itself follows as one print every time, repeat, that everything is uniquely formed as a part of life's own expression and own becoming. And that as life, I actually sort of really talk about it becoming a life's yearning for itself, for its own want and desire to be expressed in so many different forms, that it allows itself the freedom to just express and reveal itself constantly. And that's why it's more a language than it is a system. It's this ability for us to be able to listen to this conversation all the time and really be able to hear what life's saying and witness what it's revealing in that conversation.
Yeah. And in fact, at one point you ask your readers to view your work not just as a book, right, that they're just reading, but as really like engaging in a conversation, and you call it like a meandering course. And so do you want to talk a little bit about how you would hope that somebody who picks up your book or starts to delve into it, how they relate to it, and in that way?
Yeah. I think one of the most important things about the book is that as you travel further into it, you really understand that what you're endeavoring to create is your own book. It is there and it's written in context for you to be able to understand things like, what is this place I live? Who are the people? What is the land? What are the whispers of the wind? How does it flow? How does it work? And as you write into that and as you read into that, you discover why this deep importance of localism and localization is so deeply important. People in place. How can I bring that down? Who's here? What's the sounds? What's the songs? What's the land's dreaming of where I am? And we write that into the book because that's what's relevant, where we are and all of that story that's being developed where we are, and really being able then from this writing to create a whole nother book. And each person's book is going to be completely different from their perspective. And one of the big things that I challenge people for as we move through it is that deep understanding that, seeing ourselves as these sacred beings as much as every other aspect of life, and therefore unraveling ourselves to know ourselves as a sacred part of life, not separate to life, but how we are the same sacred creations. And therefore, what we are creating in that book is revealing our own self as a part of who we are, where we are, the people, the place, the land, and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, I love that. So really, it reminds me so much of what I tried to do with my own book, The Web of Meaning. Like you're blurring these distinctions between each of the things that we're taught in our dominant culture to make separate, right? And there's the reading the book, I'm reader, you're the writer, but you're blurring that distinction. And then the distinction between our own life and all the life that is around us. And you have this it was a word I actually I never knew before, lemniscate, which is essentially the infinity symbol, right? Which is really, it takes it's almost like a character in the book, take a central. Do you want to talk about what the iconic sort of meaning is of that symbol for you?
The lemniscate, or as I explained, what we commonly call the lazy eight, laying on its side sort of thing.
Right.
But that lemniscate is really about the flow that is life, that everything really weaves in and through and out of again. I think one of the most important things is that what I really wanted to do is that I know life so deeply from this scientific perspective, but the book itself came through such a meditative state that in writing it, I wanted to really bring it together. And one of the really key components of that is allowing people to visualize and to do that, create so many illustrations in there. And the use of the lemniscate became so real in being able to help people see every different phase in different ways that you can really flow into and out of, and it really makes it something that you can not just visualize but bring into you because you visualize it. You can really start to feel that flow going through and feel the layers that you're both taking off but then discovering and walking into.
Love that. And yeah, there's something about that notion that sort of flowing in and out, like we can live our lives like that lazy eight. And before we just finish focusing on what's on your book, Cari, I just wanted to highlight something I just loved when I came across it. You call them bibliomancy, like these kind of a whole selection of these epigrams, like jewels. Like as you're walking along, you discover this like mine of jewels. And I just want, there were so many I loved. I just wanted to kind of quote a couple of them, which is very similar to what everything you've just been talking about here. There's one that it's a simple expression. It says, "We are both an experience and expression of life." I just so love that. And similarly, it's not just a question of what would life like to offer through us, but what would life like to be as us? And I feel like those capture just that sense of that flow, like that there is not like us in life, that we are life expressing itself. And just was one kind of curiosity I had, how did these incredible insights, these amazing epigrams come to you? Was that in meditation, or was that like, I was just curious about how these things bubbled up so powerfully.
I began life as a poet.
Mm.
And so, and so those sorts of little quips are written everywhere for me. And in fact, when I first started to write the book, it was pulling all of those different pieces together and placing them down because they had come from the meditation and then expanding them. And so the book itself grew out of all of these different questions and expressions and feelings that life had of what would it look like, for you to be able to accept. And that particular one you said about you are both an experience and an expression is a really, really important part of the book for people to get to understand that not only are you experiencing life, but you are an expression of life. And not only are you an expression to another person, but you are an experience for another person to have as well. So this experience and expression is this constant exchange that's happening between us, which again, I sort of like to phrase as a conversation that life is having both with us and through us all the time.
Yeah, love that so much. Thanks. And it actually reminds me of when I was at COP21 in Paris, like some years back, and there were these like slogans, like flyers that were going around on the underground there around the time saying, "We are not defending nature. We are nature defending itself." And so that just like resonates so much with me. It so inspired me at the time. And that whole sense of going from that realization of what we are to engaging with actually what's going on in the world is a great way to turn to you, Richard, and your own path and your own book. So Richard, as I mentioned earlier, as author of the book Birthing the Symbiotic Age, an ancient blueprint for a new creation. And so you're bringing the book out, right, section by section on Substack. And so we can, let's get that link in the chat so people can explore that. And when I started to go into the sections you've already shared with us, I was just blown away by what you described as this incredible, profound, life-altering experience you had at age 12, which then continued to recur as you began to grow into adulthood. So do you want to give us just a sense then of what that was, what that was about and how that affected the direction of your life, Richard?
First of all, thank you for letting me, share and be part of this panel. It's really amazing to hear Cari and some related parallel experience, especially in writing this book, which involved going back, which is almost 50 years. That dates me. So it goes back 50 years to these experiences. So I've been working on this book for 17 years and 2.5 to 3 years intensively. And what it involves is going back to formative experiences that we all have, and then looking at the layers and just, peeling it back. So ultimately, the question I wanted to address and do my best to communicate to the reader is, how do these experiences of a transcendent reality that take you both beyond this sense of this world, but within it, how does that relate to practical community building and the style and the form of building networks? So what's interesting about it is that I don't consider myself an quote expert, in terms of network weaving or community development. To some extent, it's an avocation, but it's a lifelong passion that came out of these transcendent experiences. And in the book, I chronicle that. The experience of what I call the luminous web of this underlying architecture of reality, and then experiences in nature and how that seemed to be a reflection of that underlying reality. So it's an ongoing experience. And then I began to ask the question as a kid, if there's this order, but with emergence within this order, if there's both happening within creation, why is human society so out of whack?
Yeah.
What happened? So that's been an ongoing question that I've been not just intellectually, researching, but experientially by getting involved in community. So I've been involved in community efforts for more than 40 years in different places, San Diego, Reno, Nevada, but also in Sri Lanka, which is a kind of a mothership of a community development movement that's based on spiritual foundation.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Richard. And the sense I got was, I mean, to me, what I picked up from these first sections that you shared on Substack is the way in which having a profoundly transcendent spiritual experience can naturally lead to this drive to engage with life by looking at that distinction between what you experience as a deeper reality, right? And seeing this like a world with a worldview of separation and how that has caused so much harm and how it seems so misaligned with that sense of reality you heard. I love that at some point you talked about how the experience of the transcendent, you said, was truly trans-ending, which I really got struck by because I've never even thought of that, how that word transcendent has that other potential meaning. Yeah, ending that trance of separation. Yeah. And you said that at some point your father, when you were a teenager, basically said, well, with all these great things you're talking about, Richard, what are you going to do about it? So you basically spent your life essentially, as I understand it, answering that question. And I was very, very struck by what you wrote about Sarvodaya, and I don't think I'm pronouncing it quite right, but you'll correct me in a moment. But as I really thank you for introducing me to that when we first got to talk a year or more ago. And I just see that as one of the most exciting explorations of what is actually possible for really an ecological civilization, but is happening in real life on the ground right now. And so maybe you can just tell us about what Sarvodaya is actually doing right now and how that's a manifestation of this way of going from the spiritual to the practical.
Yeah. Absolutely. So Sarvodaya has been around for 65 years. It started as a service learning project in a poor village in Sri Lanka in 1958. And subsequently, over the last 65 years, they've spread to half of the towns and villages, communities in Sri Lanka. So about 15,000 communities, 5,000 of these communities have more formal, I call them ecosystem networks. So the way it works is they take this basic idea of transcendent virtue. In their case, it's a Buddhist-based movement. So for them, it's called the four sublime abodes of Buddhism, which are universal virtues, such as joy in the joy of others, equanimity, sharing, and compassion. So those are universal, and yet those are the energies that drive the community development movement. So it is very articulate, it's upfront, it's foundational. What struck me about that is that's really different than in the West, in the way we build community, where because of the fear of religion and being imposed, and the separation between the supposed secular and the quote sacred. Because of that, we've been blinded to the foundational necessity to incorporate these underlying spiritual virtues in how we actually build a community. And that's what excited me about Sarvodie, is because they seamlessly integrated in a way that is unique. And as a category, spirituality in the West is also separate. So it's part of this kind of Western kind of commodification and materialism. Even spirituality has become a business. And it's in Sri Lanka and the Sarvodie movement, it's radically different in that the stage of actualization or awakening is not an end stage. It's a precursor stage to fulfilling basic needs. So it turns Maslow's hierarchy of needs upside down. In the West, it's linear. It starts with the idea that you have to, feed yourself, take care of security, then have, needs, self-esteem and love, and then community. And then you have this kind of self-actualization. Actually, it's reversed. And that's in alignment with indigenous traditions that are fully integrated. And this is what has struck me about Sarvodie. And that's what I've been translating, is how to achieve that in the West.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is one of the most important things that we can do. And one thing that I love, that as you're describing what's the overall thinking in Sarvodie, I want to make sure I get my pronunciation right, is this quote from their founder, Dr. Ari: "We build the road and the road builds us," which almost like it could have come directly from Cari's book, like that sense, once again, of the sort of infinite loop and how those distinctions don't exist. And that seems to me to be such a crucial learning for, as we're looking at possibilities for an ecological civilization here in our future, in the West, is rather than seeing this distinction, but say, oh, the spiritual's over there and the practical is here, like, is actually, and not just going like, well, we set the conditions and then we can become transcendent, but as what you're saying, we can start from that realization of that basic unity, that deep interconnectedness, and then look at what the implications lead us to, the practical implications, which ultimately lead to a transformation of our society. So great work. Thanks so much. And I'm detecting that Paddy was, as you all saw him here, spotlighted before, but unfortunately he has been, it looks like he lost his internet connection, and we've been trying to reach him and reconnect, but he hasn't yet joined us. So with any luck, he'll join us a little bit later, and then we can spend a little bit of time with him in the second half just to get more of an introduction to his work. But just in case he doesn't come back to us, I'll just give a little bit. Oh, I think he is entering the waiting room right now as we speak. So it'll be a lot better if he can give a pitch to his book rather than me. But I can say, as I'm just turning to him to introduce Paddy, I came across his book, I guess a year or more ago, maybe even 2 years ago, before it was even published. He reached out to me. I was super impressed by what the book is doing, because it looks, it's called Building Tomorrow, and it looks at very specific, sort of just like we were talking about in terms of Sarvodie being an example of what's actually possible happening right now. Gave all these different examples, very tangible, real concepts in the West right now. And as I think a lot of people know, I'm writing a book right now on the vision and possibilities of an ecological civilization. Hey, Paddy, great to reconnect with you here. I'm just giving you a little bit of an introduction, then we can turn to you right now. But as I came across Paddy's book, I was in this deep research phase of the book, and I loved it. To me, Paddy's book was like a treasure trove. I made so many notes, like he's filled pages and pages of my massive note document with the different examples of what is possible right now. Some things I knew already, some things I was just discovering for the first time. So I promise, Paddy, when I do refer to your work, it'll be with full with full credit there. So thanks so much for what you've done. And given I'm looking at time, want to make sure we have time for our breakout groups and going back into the Q&A later on. But maybe what I can do with you, Paddy, right now is just focus on a few of the examples that I thought were particularly just incredibly important for people to know, because there's all, like Paddy's book goes all the way from looking at donut economics to looking at concepts like sovereign money, local currencies, I mean, it's a big array of stuff. But one thing that I was so excited by, some people might know, a lot of my own research and some of the things I write, a lot of it is always about how our corporate system, how we're dominated by these massive transnational corporations. And they're defined as people legally. But if they were actually people psychologically, we'd recognize that they're psychopaths, because all they're concerned about is maximizing for the bottom line. And to me, this is one of the most terrifying things about where our civilization is right now. Essentially, our future is in the hands of a series of all-powerful psychopaths who only care. They might say nice things and look nice, but they only care about optimizing for that bottom line, even if it destroys basically all of life on this earth. But Paddy, you described this future guardian model, which, as I read it, it was like, yes, why isn't this so widespread that everybody's talking about it? So perhaps you can just give us a little bit of a sense of what that model, how that model is based and structured, and how it can work so well.
Yeah, sure. First of all, I'd like to apologize for suddenly cutting out there. My computer, the plug system didn't work and it took ages to load back on again. So I'm really sorry about that. I'll catch up on the recording later. But yeah, so the Future Guardian model, this is a model that's being pioneered by a company called River Simple in Wales. And basically they've redefined the company. So companies have a kind of constitution called the Articles of Association. And they've, excuse me, they've rewritten the Articles of Association. This is how it works in the UK. Mm-hmm. And then got a system of custodians and stewards to kind of make the way they've written the articles work in the company itself. Mm-hmm. And what they've done is they've said that the purpose of the company, which it's legally obliged to do in the because it's in the articles rather than just being a mission statement on a website or whatever. So it's got a purpose, and so this model can be applied to other companies as well, and it doesn't have to be a kind of do good impact type purpose. It could just be to make tables that are affordable, durable and affordable to 95% of people in our market or something like that. And so the articles say, yeah, the company should pursue the purpose while balancing and protecting the following benefit streams. And then there are 6 essentially mini statements of purpose for each of 6 stakeholder groups. So there's one for the investors, but also the employees, the customers, the commercial partners, the community, and the environment. And so what this basically means is that rather than the investors profit, essentially, i.e. the investor stakeholder group being the main thing, it's just one out of those 6. So it's no more important than any of the others. It's just as important to the company that it decreases its negative environmental impact, or it treats its customers well, as it is that it makes profit for the investors. And all of those are subordinate to the purpose, which is what it's doing for society, essentially. So I think there are quite a lot of different models at the moment that are kind of popping up for different types of governance. For example, there's Faith in Nature has a Nature on the board, and B Labs has kind of a bit of a change, like it's profit plus stakeholder groups. But the Future Guardian model really flips it so that profit's just one of the.
Yeah. And that's what I love so much about that, is that it gives a sense of what a corporation actually could be and should be about, which is to optimize for all these stakeholders. And it doesn't say, no, you're not allowed to make money and be successful, but it's just, that becomes one part of those of the whole sort of power structure. And I also understand you mentioned that they have two sets of shares, right? So you have these custodian shares, which are owned by each of these different 6 groups, and then investment shares. So you can sort of go out, raise money for investors, but they don't have a vote other than that 1/6 vote as investors in the custodial share. Is that, am I understanding
Yeah,
that?
that's exactly it. Yeah. So the ownership is still owned by investors, shareholders, etc. But though they just don't have as much power, essentially. So it can still a future guiding company can still raise money kind of for the investors. The basis is that they get money back. You know, they make money out of it, kind of thing. But yeah, they just don't have as much power in terms of being able to, you know, force the company to just make money.
Right. Just a fantastic model, which I definitely intend to write about in my book when it finally comes out. But maybe we have time to just turn to one more example. And you mentioned how Riversimple was the company that took this shareholder model that you described. But when it comes to the circular economy, which a lot of people talk about, like, oh, wouldn't it be good if? But they have done this example of this almost like redefining what a circular economy means, right? Really, truly going from a sense of it's not just people selling to different people and getting it back again or whatever, but it's a whole different structure. Do you want to just give a little description of that too?
Yeah. So you mean the Riversimple example in the
exactly, with
yeah.
the sort of going from the sale of service model to from raw materials to consumer with a hydrogen
exactly
car.
Yeah. So basically yeah, they're also they're a very pioneering company, and they're also pioneering a part of the circular economy. So to a kind of quite standard way of kind of implementing the circular economy already is a sale of service model, which is where a company, rather than selling things, it sells the service the things provide and keeps ownership of whatever thing it is. Like it can be done for washing machines, for example. And this aligns incentives so that essentially, rather than the company making more money by selling more of washing machines or cars or whatever it is, and therefore, if the thing breaks and someone has to buy another one, they make more money. If the company continues owning the thing, then every time that it needs repair or replacement, then the cost falls on the company. So they're incentivized, their financial incentive is aligned with the environment and the customer. And that's, as I say, it's kind of, that's applied quite widely, but Riversimple are kind of applying this all the way up the supply chain. So they build hydrogen fuel cell cars and they provide those on sale of service to their customers. But then within the cars, there are the fuel cell is like the engine. And that's an expensive piece of kit, obviously. And that so they're getting those on sale of service from the fuel cell manufacturer. And the kind of exact structure, financial structure, is designed so that the fuel cell manufacturer makes more money, the better, the more environmentally friendly the fuel cells are, effectively. And then within the fuel cell, there's a membrane that's a very important part and, again, very expensive. So that's also on a sale of service model. And then within the membrane, platinum is used. And so again, the platinum is on a sale of service model. That's just a direct rental, essentially, of like a grams payment per gram per month kind of thing. And this means this kind of realigns the whole ownership structure. And so it means what one of the kind of top level consequences is that if this gets applied more widely, then miners, rather than, so mining is essentially the entire business model is against the circular economy in a way, because they rely on getting virgin materials all the time, and therefore they're needing to be more and more virgin materials. That's their entire business model, right? Whereas in this model, where they're just renting the materials that they mine some materials and then rent them out, it turns them into kind of stewards of the materials as they cycle around.
Exactly.
And I think this. Oh, sorry, if that's.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, in a way, it comes right back to that lazy eight, that sort of flow. Like, rather than going into the linear suppliers and then they stop caring about it, it comes back to them. So it's almost like in a fractal way. It takes our entire economy and puts it into that kind of that kind of infinite flow. And maybe just to finish off, I know you wanted to share what work you're doing right now on bioregional cosmolocalism, and we don't have too much time because I want to go into breakout groups and then not hog the floor and have time for other people to ask their questions to you. But you just want to give us just a 2-minute heads up as to what that.
Yes, I will give it my best shot. It is quite hard to explain in 2 minutes, but basically, bioregional cosmolocalism. So my book is written. In my book, I concentrate on the specific things that we can do now in order to start building a new system. And in the conclusion, I sketch out a new system. And then my recent work on bioregional cosmolocalism is thinking about what this new system can look like in the future. And essentially, bioregionalism is geographic organization of kind of local societies, nation states equivalents around bioregions, which essentially it's like aligning with ecology and geography and kind of natural environment, which enables us to massively decrease our environmental impact and begin becoming truly regenerative, which obviously we're a million miles from at the moment. And then cosmolocalism it's an economic system, so kind of equivalent to capitalism, but it has a collaborative dynamic instead of the competitive one of capitalism. So essentially it's global networks with local nodes, and this can be for factories or maker spaces or farms or whatever. And excuse me, the global network has a charter, so you can write into the charter, for example, the overall donut goal of meeting the needs of all within the means of the living planet and the stakeholder basis that River Simple has. You can write those kind of things into the charter to ensure the whole network is like that. And then also they share all the information, the nodes do, through an information commons, which creates that collaborative development. So yeah,
that's great. Yeah, thanks, Paddy. And I can see a lot of interplay between what Richard is exploring and with the approach you described, Richard, and what Paddy is exploring there too. So hopefully the two of you will get a chance to compare notes in more detail as we go.
Yeah, we've attempted to have a call a couple of times over the last couple of months, but haven't quite made it yet. And I'm really annoyed that I've missed both of the parts of both Cari and Richard for learning about it.
For your benefit and everyone's here, it's going to be recorded. You'll have plenty of opportunity to check it out. I hope I'll get it out up on the DTN, maybe later today even. But now let's turn back to our own breakout groups. And then after the 10-minute of breakout groups, everyone else will have a chance to ask their own questions of Cari, Richard, and Paddy. And I'm going to ask in the breakout groups for you to just talk about this question I just put into the chat right now. Basically, from everything that you've been hearing now from each of Cari, Richard, and Paddy, if we can think of these as principles of a life-affirming future, those connections from spiritual to practical, what it actually means to reorganize our society in a way that does lead to that interconnection. Where do those principles of a life-affirming future show up in your own life and work? So maybe let's go into the breakout rooms, join back in the main session 10 minutes from now. And I'll tell you that. And by the way, I'll be hovering in and out of different breakout rooms just so I can get a feel. So if you see me somewhere, just be there for a couple of minutes. Don't let me intrude on your conversation. I'll just sort of give a wave or whatever, and then I'll join somebody else a couple of minutes later. So see you all back in 10. Great. Well, I think we're all rejoining now in the main room. And I think there was fascinating and rich discussions taking place, as far as I can tell, from all around. And so welcome back to Cari and Paddy and Richard. Hey there. And now what I would like to do is turn the tables to all of you who want to ask any questions of our three panelists, or share any reflections that came from the breakout rooms that seem very, salient to what we're talking about today. So yeah, well, to begin with, Suzanne, I see your Zoom hand is up, so very welcome to you, Suzanne. And I was going to make an announcement about your offer at the end, but since you're here, why don't you share what you have right now, and then we can actually talk about that with you here in the spotlight. So
yes, thank you, Jeremy.
Suzanne. Let's get you spotlighted. Hey.
Thanks, Jeremy. I just popped into the chat this essay contest that I have going, and still got enough time to enter it, and there are good money prizes and no entry fee. But I loved all these presentations, all these things that everybody's doing. They're just right on. My particular part in the grand scheme is to look for the big things, like all the local things are fabulous. We need them. But how do we handle this horrible mess we're in that could wipe out humanity? So I look for kind of the big ideas, like what could happen that would change everything. And so I put out this essay contest. I have ideas, but I couldn't get any play with them. Everybody's focused on here in the States, elect Democrats, as if that's going to do it. No. So I did put out this essay. I put my money where my mouth is, looking for ideas. And so far, so good. It's been out for about 10 days or maybe 2 weeks. And I have a lot of submissions, and some of them are wonderful. And I'll end up sharing them in, somehow or other when all is said and done. But I just love it if your audience would pick up on what I've done.
Yeah.
Let me pop it in again, since these things go by quickly. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, Suzanne. And and I did want to really just make everybody aware of that. It's so absolutely perfect for not this topic we're talking about today and the DTN as a whole, for people to share their ideas. And one of our parts of our vision statement that the moderators have shared just last week is a sense of cohering, connecting, cohering, amplifying. And those are the very things you can do by putting an essay in, submitting to Suzanne's competition. And let me just suggest to you, Suzanne, before we move on to the next person, we could maybe, if you were interested, you might, perhaps we could share all of the top submissions for DTN. So we could actually make that an ongoing thing where people can read the different submissions, share comments about it, and really move from that. So it's not just a done deal by that end point, but we can really look at a building from that on the DTN. So
well, you are the perfect kind of person and audience for, what I'm up to. I remember when you first put out your whole thing, it was about coming together to figure out what to do about the world. I thought, oh, right, that's what I want to be part of. So I'll be in touch with you as we go along.
Excellent. Well,
thank you
thanks
so much.
That. And let's turn to Barnaby. Hey there, Barnaby.
Hi. I speak with a deep sense of foreboding, having just seen on the news that Hezbollah have managed to land Iranian-created weapons into Israel, and I'm wondering what we can. I think it seems to me we have maybe weeks, months, to have some sort of global movement that is ecological and centered around peace, that needs to just go all out. Everybody needs to find some semblance of agreement. We can agree the general parameters of some sort of new political paradigm based on seemingly citizens' assembly seems to be what most of the vast array of progressives agree on, and like the third speaker talking about a new sort of more in-depth triple bottom line, and what can we do and how can we create a forum whereby we can agree and agree on an action plan that's going to get us all out on the streets every single day, that's going to escalate until we we replace the corrupt systems with people-centered systems.
Yeah. Thanks for that question, Barnaby. Who wants to share their thoughts on this? Obviously, none of us can have the complete answer, but I'd love to hear any thoughts you have. Any of the panel.
Yes. Wait. Can I speak, or any of the?
Who are we? Oh, is Inger?
Inge.
Oh,
Yes,
see.
Inge. Yes.
Do you have something to say as a reflection of what Barnaby was just asking?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
great.
absolutely.
Please, Inge.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes,
Let's
yes.
can we spotlight Inger also, so we
Yes.
can have this conversation.
I'm the co-founder of the World Climate School and work on literacy in mathematics and reading skill as well, out of India and Norway. And
Right.
I'm also working with the missing piece, which is peace, out of Japan and Hiroshima, and that's Humming for Peace with a choir in Hiroshima, which is connected to children worldwide. And I think we have to step up the voices of we want peace on planet Earth. And it's urgency for all of us. And it's the echo chamber of the leaders of today. They're just spinning around in their own heads and just militarizing everything. And it's just screwing things up for us. So I think we should really mobilize, align the message that this is the year of the Olympic Games, and for humanity, we're putting down our weapons for this year, and we will do that for the next year and all the way for for eternity, for long-lasting peace, because we need to bring forward to reconnect with nature and our inner nature of violence. We have to stop what we're doing right now on the planet.
Yeah.
So that is my call. To mobilize an action plan along the peace message of the Olympic Games, and to get into the story of Hiroshima and Nagasaki with exactly what we don't want to happen on the planet.
Yeah. Thank you. This is a very, very powerful response to that. And I don't know if any of our three panelists want to share their reflections on this really, really critical question.
Yeah, so I'm, excuse me, I'm like not an expert on the political side and peace and what have you at the moment, but I think on the one hand, yeah, it's very important to protest and to do what we can to kind of get things to change quickly as soon as possible. But on the other hand, I think equally for political systems as other systems, thinking about it in terms of what kind of systems can work in a long-term sense in the future, and beginning to build them up now is really important, because as Barnaby mentioned, there are citizens' assemblies, which is a fairly new development kind of thing. And then there's also sociocracy, which is another kind of good for small groups. But I have a feeling, I've experienced it quite a bit in a co-op that I'm living in, but I haven't, I think it could probably be applied to kind of the UN process, for example, like international processes, much better than the current UN processes. And then there's loads of digital democracy things in Taiwan. And I'm not sure if this is something that's actually happened or it's just an idea. I have a feeling it has happened somewhere, though. I think it might have happened in Taiwan, of basically just setting up a parallel political process. So that doesn't actually have power, but just publicly does its things and shows how much better decisions it makes, basically, as a way of getting people to move across. And essentially just getting all of the pieces in place and building them up as much as possible to have a new system in place in like 10 or 20 or 30 years time, kind of thing.
These are great ideas, Paddy. Thanks for that. And yeah, so some of these I'll also be writing about in this Ecological Civilization book. And one thing I'd like to just kind of add there's some people might see a little bit of a disconnect between what Barnaby was saying about the short term and what Paddy's saying about 10, 20, 30 years out. And I do feel that it is important to be able to hold somehow both of those at the same time. There is an urgency. There is this potential. None of us know. We pretty much everyone here on the DTN has a sense we're heading towards the precipice of some sort of collapse at some point. None of us knows when that's going to be. It could be quite short. It could take a lot of people by surprise, happen quite short. It may not happen for decades because of these complex ways in which complexity upon complexity interacts with human living systems, with ecosystems, with all the different layers. And that's why focusing, like not letting too much a sense of short-term disaster deflect us is so important, because we need to be rebuilding. And like Richard, you write about how the Sarvodaya movement does, sort of, it builds a parallel society and doesn't try to break down the old mainstream one, but builds parallel to the mainstream Sri Lankan society so that we can begin to build to that possible life-affirming future. We don't know if it'll get there in time, but at least we can have that idea of what we can move towards. So yeah, thanks. And let's turn to Thomas. I'm looking at the time. We're almost at the end of our formal part of the session. But actually, just as a heads up, at the end of this kind of formal part, we're actually going to just keep the Zoom room open so that just like in a real room, like once the formal part's over, people can just hang around and chat a little bit more. So anyone who wants is invited to stay around and just kind of, we'll stop the recording and just chat informally to let these ideas continue to kind of interweave. But let's turn to Thomas, if we could, for the last kind of question, our formal grouping here. Hey there, Thomas. Great to see you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Good to see you. So I'm going to frame this. It's going to end in a question, I promise. So
Yes.
I want to be clear that I recognize that this is a multifaceted thing that we need to look at. So it's a spiritual aspect, it's a cultural governance, and all sorts of aspects. But I think there's one that we tend to overlook in these conversations, and that's the material aspect. All of this will not work unless we find ways of providing materials in balance with the planet and her ecosystems to 10 billion people. It just won't work. And there is an opportunity coming up to find out how we could do that in next 10, 20, 30 years, as 300 million people at a minimum will be displaced by ecosystems collapse and will be in need for new homes. And now the question is, how would you, given all of you, the things you know, go about giving those 300 million people new homes?
Who would like to share any thoughts on that? Yeah, thank you for the way you framed that, Thomas.
I can't put my hand up, but it's Joe here from Australia, and I know that in Queensland we've already got, I mean, across the world we've already got housing crisis and homelessness crisis, and yeah, I think that's a brilliant question. I don't have the answer, but it's certainly something we're already struggling with. There's already in Australia every year people displaced from flooding, and they've got nowhere to go.
Yeah, I think, excuse me, I can't kind of directly answer how to house the 300 million people kind of thing, but I think the kind of a couple of approaches that are kind of interlinked is one is using more biomaterials, and the other is creating a truly circular economy, and particularly with regional circularity. So basically, if you think about it in terms of, so with biomaterials, for example, building houses out of wood and materials like that, and also there are organizations that are working to build houses, learning to basically build better houses out of the materials on the land where the houses are being built from. So for example, last year I've been living in a cooperative in British Columbia, and people building houses there have been building them out of clay from the land and pumice stone from fairly close, not that close, but within British Columbia at least, kind of thing, and like wood from the land and things like that, but doing it in a using modern design techniques and so they're really good quality houses, but with local materials. So I think that approach is a good one for building materials kind of thing. And then in terms of providing for the 10 billion people, as you were saying initially, we've already created an absolutely immense amount of artificial materials, cement, steel, plastic, you name it. We've got a lot of materials, right? And at the moment, it's once things are used, they become rubbish, right? But so the kind of overall change that we need to make is to recognize that approximately now, or, you know, around about now, the direction we're going in is we need to not need to make any new materials, but use all those waste materials, see them as new raw materials, and learn how to upcycle them. And again, there are I've got an example of that one in my book, actually, a company called MiniWiz, and they do even do building modules as well. So I think that kind of approach can be used for buildings as well. And it's one of these things where we're relatively early in the development of technologies to do this kind of thing. So we need to kind of sway relative in comparison to how well developed other parts of our technology is, kind of thing. So we need to kind of push our development in the direction that enables us to get much better at it, because we probably can do it, essentially, because people are good at solving problems.
Jeremy, and I got another direction or angle on this. So the challenge with getting anything done, like solving any problem, it's really based on overcoming a previous problem, which is endemic, which is siloing of problem solving in a competitive culture of separation at any scale. And that's the challenge, that in order to solve any problem, you have to build trust networks of people across the silos, because siloing actually separates resources. I call them frozen assets in a community. By design, it's to divide and rule us, keep us separate. So the challenge to solving any problem is you have to pave the pathway by building trust networks in a very concrete way. So, for example, you've got to get people accustomed to solving other problems like growing more food locally, consuming food. So building food system networks around energy, water, housing. So it's not like one organization can solve this, even if it had the best idea in the universe. It's like, I use an example in Reno, Nevada, where I work. There's like, I think there's 20 organizations dealing with homelessness. But the way they were approaching it, first of all, there wasn't a lot of collaboration. But you can't solve the problem of homelessness because it itself is connected to a myriad of other problems. So instead of building the 21st homeless organization to try to solve homelessness, the wisest thing to do would be to get the people that are already doing good to be aligned with a deeper intention of collaboration and build that trust network to pave the road so they can go to greater and greater levels of complex decision making. You can't solve any of these problems in silos. That is something that I've noticed for 40 years, and I've done my best to try to learn how simply. The question is, well, then how do you build trust networks without yourself building a separate silo competing with others? And there really is an answer to that. It is possible to do that. Sarvoti is doing it. I was going to say one thing that might be really useful is that during the late 60s and early 70s, Vaclav Benda, a Catholic dissident, he was in a band, he created what's called the Parallel Polis, POLIS movement. It is partly the basis for citizen assembly movement, but they galvanized millions of Czech. They did the same thing in Kosovo in the wars. The ethnic Albanians formed networks because they were cut off from support from the government. So it is possible to galvanize rapidly millions of people if you do it in each community, and then it spreads fractally. So it is possible to have a bottom-up emergent movement where you have thousands of communities coordinating from within themselves and then communicating at a regional level. That is doable with technology. That's the problem I think we have to solve.
That's great. That's great.
Jeremy,
Thanks.
I want to just
Why
close
don't
out.
you finish for us? Yeah.
close out really quickly on it.
Yeah.
I think one of the really important things for everybody to remember, both going back to Barnaby's discussion and this one with Thomas, is that we can look at this from a really big scale, and as Suzanne said, you know, there's big systems for us to consider. But I think one of the really important things that we all need to do is to walk away as well and consider our own actions of peace, our own being of peace, as opposed to always thinking about, you know, huge movements of peace. We are that movement. We can actually activate ourselves in greater peaceful manners within our own space and our own being and our own actions every day. And I think extending on that, going to answer Thomas's question, one of the things I find often with people when they're looking at these sorts of circumstances and situations is that people often try to find this big overarching thing instead of coming down and go, what's going to work where you are? Because we're not looking for one solution. We're looking for lots and lots of different solutions in lots and lots of places, and they're going to look very different, and they're going to be really unique because they're going to be relevant to where you are, what resources you have, what the actual issues are, why those issues were, you know, came about in the first place. So don't be afraid to actually pull it right down and go, where am I, and what would housing needs be where I am, within my footstep, within my radius, these sorts of things, to find the solutions where you are and not have them look the same or be the same or feel the same as anywhere else, but really relevant to who and where you are.
Yeah, beautifully said. Yeah, thanks. And we keep getting this fractal theme going through this entire conversation, and that's so apropos to what you just said, Cari. Thank you. And I am looking. We've overrun our time that we allocate by about 10 minutes or so. So I want to draw this kind of formal session part to a close, and apologies to those who still have their hands up, but maybe you can actually share if you want to stay around for the informal part, and so we can still hear your voice and your ideas there anyway. Just a few announcements before I kind of close off. One is, if you're wanting to do like more of a deeper dive on these topics, we have our Circle of Practice meeting that meets 2 days from now on Thursdays. I am going to put that in the chat right there, the link, so you can sign up to that and join that 2 days from now. And it's an opportunity to kind of do a little bit more like deep listening, deeper integrating and anchoring. It's going to be hosted by Miriam Lute, Sigurd Anderson, and Galea Tayano Ronan. I believe all three of them will be there. So if you feel like, oh, I don't want to just leave this the way it is, it's a chance to really go deeper in our community. Secondly, just to give a heads up to, and I know that Jason has shared this in the chat already, but there's Jason Sears, who's a new member here at the DTN, is offering this opportunity to create what he's calling Village DTN. So the link is right there. It's a chance to connect up a couple of weeks from now. Click on the link. It's going to meet on the second Wednesday of each month, and it gives us a chance to kind of share, co-create, build connections and community leadership together. So really encourage us to explore what's possible with this new idea. And finally, we've been talking about what we can do, and looking at practical things we can do. And Taya Sun has started a new space here on the Deep Transformation. She's calling the Doables space, which is this opportunity. If you click on this link, you'll see the space to just share smaller things, like a kind of a punchy explanation or just sharing of something you're doing that is moving us towards that future we want. So recognizing that we are all small parts of something very big, and this is a way we can be inspired by what others are doing. So I just want to say a deep thank you to all three of you for the big contributions you have made to transforming our world, and the books that you have and are putting out there, and for sharing this conversation today. And if others are like me, then I know that a lot of people have been really inspired by the possibilities of everything you've been talking about. And also, I feel gotten a deeper sense of how all these different parts, the separate parts of our separation worldview are actually so much more deeply interconnected. And that's, it seems to me, is that path forward. So thanks, big thank you to all three of you. And feel free, anyone who wants to just stay around and just go informal. I will stop recording right now.